We continue our coverage on President Cyril Ramaphosa's inauguration and the tough job awaiting the country's 7th administration under the Government of National Unity. Joining me now for this conversation is FEDUSA, that is the Federation of Unions of South Africa, Deputy Secretary General Xoli Mngambi. We're also joined by Kganki Matabane. He is the CEO of the Black Business Council. To both of you, thank you very much for your time. Let me start with you, Mr. Mngambi. Let's talk about whether you feel that the president touched on all aspects troubling South Africa, whether it be the issue of unemployment, crime, poverty, you name it. Do you think that the president was all-encompassing today?
Good evening to you, Xoli, and good evening to the viewers. As FEDUSA, we welcome President Ramaphosa's inauguration address. We have given President Ramaphosa a day before the inauguration our expectations and priorities that his 7th administration should focus on in order to rescue this country. We are happy with what we heard from the president today. He has addressed quite a number of priorities that FEDUSA has asked the president to address. He was talking about a democratic renewal process of social and economic transformation that leaves no one behind. We are delighted to hear that. We also think as FEDUSA that today, Xoli, was his real State of the Nation address. And we are saying that because the president has raised a number of issues. He spoke about unity, inclusivity, the need to work together, a democratic state, the respect for the rule of law, amongst others. So we are quite happy what we've heard today of him. So the real proof now is in the work when he appoints his new cabinet, and then we'll see the real work that will start.
Mr. Matabane, let's come to you. Some people talk about a speech that was filled with hope and confidence. Do you think that that also translates to what the business community is looking for?
Good evening to the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. And firstly, we would like to congratulate once more the president on his inauguration for the 2nd term. The speech was hopeful. The speech was touching on all the issues that we have: social ills, law enforcement, economic growth, and all those type of things. But if I was in the president's shoes, I should be asking myself a big question to say, how do you want to be remembered? Because as we all know, this is his last term. And if you look at the previous presidents, starting from President Mandela, he was remembered as this reconcile. If you look at the President Mbeki, African Renaissance, economic transformation, he's the one who created the black middle class. If you look at all the billionaires now who are black and millionaires, they were created during the time of Mbeki time. So if I was President Ramaphosa, I would then ask myself, when I retire and look back in my 2 terms presidency, how will I want to be remembered? And then for me, if you look at where we are and where the speech is trying to take us, where we are and the past, because of many other factors, COVID included, the picture does not look good.
Yeah.
So if I was him, I would say from today until I exit office, whenever that period is, I need to do certain things that will make people remember me as the president who reduced unemployment amongst the general population from 42% to maybe 20%, for young people from 75% maybe to 40%, increase the economic growth from 0%, 0 point something percent to 65%, transform the economy from getting black ownership from less than 10% to 20%, making sure that black people are running the economy, reducing the white males who are running the JSE listed companies from 75% to 50%, and reducing crime to make sure that crime gets reduced significantly. People can drive safely at night without feeling that they can be kidnapped. Businesses can operate properly without thinking someone will come and demand 30%.
Yeah.
Women can work at nights, like it happens in Europe and other countries where women can work midnights alone without feeling that some men will come. Ordinary people can walk in town, and like it's happening in Cape Town, you can walk in the middle of the night with your phone. So for me, those are the certain things that the president should be asking himself to make sure that there will be clean water. There will be people in Hambanskral will have clean water. People in Limpopo will have water. There will be electricity that is available 100% of the time to make sure that economic growth increase. So for me, I will have done that and then say, how do you make sure that those things happen? You make sure that those things happen by appointing competent, and we need to emphasize it, competent ministers. Ministers who know their job, ministers who don't have big egos, ministers who understand that they can't know everything. Ministers who don't get into departments and start changing boards of SOCs. So for me, those would be the questions that I should be asking myself.
Ashley Benjamin, Mr. Matabane has touched on a number of issues that I suspect also cut across into the labor movement. Let's talk about how you think, as a labor leader, the president can seize this moment and make or create a government that is geared towards ensuring that the environment is conducive for the economy to grow. How does it do that in the eyes of Fedusa?
Yes, thank you, Xoli. I think first of all, the president was bold today. He mentioned that through the votes, the masses have identified what they want to be prioritized in the 7th administration. And for us, the president was more direct and highlighting the failures of the 6th administration and those before the 6th administration, like the lack of housing, safety and security. People want decent streets with lighting, they want food to eat, they want jobs. Those are issues that we've also addressed with the president, safety and security. But he speaks about inclusivity. These are fundamentals to get our economy right on track. Only through economic growth that we can see jobs created, alleviation of poverty, looking at the social framework and protection flows in our society. But I think what was interesting and what we support as Fedusa is a statement about a national dialogue. That is exactly where we need to start off. Once the cabinet has been populated, then we need that national dialogue sooner than later, that all the stakeholders, all the role players, political parties, organized labor, civil society, sit together and let's plot a way forward with inclusivity, how we can arrest unemployment, poverty, hunger, job security and jobs. And we are particularly happy to hear that he re-emphasized the rights of workers, the rights of the rule of law and the respect and dignity of all South Africans. So we're looking forward for that national dialogue, and we think with the 7th administration and with the support of the country, with President Ramaphosa, we can build a more prosperous. It's not going to be easy. Let's admit that. It's not going to be an easy ride. But I think the nation deserves it. And as Fedusa, we are fully behind any efforts that can lead to prosperity, economic growth, jobs, and poverty alleviation.
Mr. Matabane, let's talk specifics now. And I want to talk portfolios that I would want to think a business is probably interested in. Let's start with the Ministry of Small Business Development. That ministry has been criticized many times for perhaps not fulfilling its role. Number one, do you think it should continue to exist? if indeed you are of that view, which of the parties in the GNU, because I think that's now how we ought to see this cabinet moving forward, which of the parties do you think would make that ministry much more vigorous?
The Minister of Small Business is extremely important. And it has been proven all over the world that the economic growth can basically come from small business and also from the National Development Plan. We support the dialogue, but we're of the view that South Africa does not lack plans. For the past 30 years, we have been having plans, ASKISA, National Development Plan, the NDP, and all those things. The plans are there, even the legislations are there, but we have not been implementing. So, for example, going back to small business, the NDP is very clear as to what needs to happen if we want to have unemployment by 2030, which is like 5 years from now, by the way. It said you need to support small business and create 11 million jobs, and 90% of those jobs are supposed to come from small business. But if you look at the configuration of small business department, it's almost like a department that is being forgotten. If you look at the budget that they have, if you look at the power that they have, it's supposed to be the center of the NDP, because if we are saying 90% of the jobs are supposed to come there, all the efforts by all the departments, from presidency, every department, all SOCs, the small development department is supposed to be at the center. But unfortunately, as we speak now, because we engage with the department a lot, as we see now, it's a by the way type of a department. People don't necessarily take it serious. So it's important from a configuration point of view. Give the small department a sufficient authority and power so that they can consolidate anything to do with small business from any department should be consolidated at that department. As we speak at the moment, they've got no authority, they've got no budget, they can't do anything. So the failure needs to be, the purported failure needs to be looked at from that point of view to say, if you give someone a huge responsibility like this, but you don't give them enough resources, chances they're not going to. So that is one part. The second part, obviously, ideally in that department, you need someone who has run a small business before, because that person will understand when they get there, they will understand the pains, the struggles, and everything that small business go through.
Yeah.
And they will be able to then do things the right way. But we're not advocating for individuals or parties, but we're just saying from a character point of view, ideally, you want someone who ran a business.
All right. Mr. Benjamin, from the point of view of Labour, I'd like for you to think about which key ministries you think are going to help unlock growth so that people are absorbed into jobs. But you will answer that question shortly after the break. Watching News at Prime, if you're just joining us, we are in discussion with the Federation of Unions of South Africa, that's FEDUSA for short. The Deputy Secretary General of that Labour Federation is Xoli Benjamin, and we're also joined by Kganki Matabane, CEO of the Black Business Council. Let's come to you, Mr. Benjamin, and let's pick up on that point of key ministries that you feel as a Labour movement could help unlock growth so that businesses are able to grow and absorb workers.
Thank you, Xoli. So first of all, we've called on President Ramaphosa to reduce the size of his cabinet. We believe this cabinet is bloated and there's no need for such a big cabinet in this current economic and political climate we find ourselves. We also believe that some ministries are duplicated, like small enterprises. We believe that that could be incorporated into Department of Trade and Industry. Obviously, the economic cluster, as they call it, is important for us as organized labor. That means National Treasury, Department of Trade and Industry, and public enterprises, amongst others. These are key enablers for economic growth, social development, and economic development in our country. We've seen a program to restore our ports over a number of months and years after it was decimated through state capture and that. So these are real issues that can boost the economy, that can lead to economic growth and more jobs. That for us should be priorities.
Yeah. Mr. Matabane, the president talking about the convening of a national dialogue of all South Africans in order to forge a social compact. What do you think that is going to help with, particularly in this country that sometimes can be really, or can really come across as fragmented?
Yeah, firstly, I think we will hope and we'll lobby for that and push to make sure that dialogue, national dialogue, or whatever it's going to be called, is not going to be a talk shop. And whatever comes out of that needs to be implemented. As I said, we don't have lack of policies. We've got so many policies in South Africa that are not implemented. So firstly, we hope that will be action-orientated national dialogue, but also we need to talk about the real issues that are troubling the country. I think we've been very nice to each other, especially taking into account that we had apartheid. But every time you try to talk about the redress, people say, no, forget about it, let's move on. So we need to have that real conversation to say, if we continue at this trajectory, at this pace, we're risking one day the population rising and say, you've wasted our 30 years, let's render the country ungovernable, let's have a revolution. So it's important that we must have real conversation.
Yeah.
We need to have the poor must be represented there in the national dialogue by the poor, because 90% of the time it's the rich people who are talking on behalf of the poor, and the poor are not in the room to talk about themselves and the things that they need.
Yeah.
And so we always assume that the poor need water there, they need this thing, they need this, but the poor don't come and say, this is actually what we need. And then from a Black Business Council point of view in transformation, there's this notion that Black people are just happy being employees. If they have a clean water, they are fine. If they've got electricity, they are fine. They must just remain as consumers in their own country, but not owners of the economy. And then we need to have that proper conversation to say, until this economy is controlled and owned and run by population according to the geographic, according to the population representation as it comes from the stats SA, where the majority of the people, who are more than 92% of the population, are reflected in the control, in the running, in the ownership of the economy, not only as consumers.
Yeah.
It's the day that we'll see real peace, and it's the day that we'll see real economic growth.
All right. Ashley Benjamin, you get to have the final word, and similar question to you. It's around this national dialogue. People like yourself, you normally converge to what is called NEDLEC, and that's where business, labor, that's where you thresh out these issues. Do you think that the national dialogue is going to help with anything? How do you think it's going to help move us forward?
Yes, Colin, we think as FEDUSA that it can be helpful. We've seen a lot of gains and positive strides that we've made as a nation through social dialogue at NEDLEC, and we believe this national dialogue that the president has, as mentioned, can actually also have the same results. I agree with my colleague of business that we don't need more policies. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Government has got a lot of good policies in place, but it's the lack of accountability coupled with corruption that has caused us in this mess that we are finding ourselves in today. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to set the rules of engagement through social dialogue, and let's take the country forward. Let's create that much needed jobs, that stability in the country, caring for the poor, the AIDS, and all sectors of society to achieve greater equality and inclusivity. Thank you.
Ashley Benjamin from the Trade Union Federation, FEDUSA. Thank you very much for your time and contribution. Kganki Matabane is the CEO of the Black Business Council. Thank you very much for your contribution.